this is a great topic. I think if we've talked to people over the last 9 months and everyone's adjusting to remote work, it seems like onboarding is in some ways even more disruptive than recruiting. So before we dive in, why don't we just go around the horn? Liz, do you want to start us off and tell us who you are?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Liv Cruzat. I recently joined Alt, www.onlyalt.com. And Alt is a platform to research, transact, and secure alternative assets. So this spans across, anything from sports cards to watches to art, sneakers, and all that good stuff. My role at Alt is head of experiences. A really unique and amazing role that I'm very excited about and digging my teeth into. The TLDR of my role is that I get to essentially ideate creative solutions and ways to both surprise and delight our employees and improve their employee experience, but also our customers. So my role spans from everything from, employee onboarding, so super relevant to what we're talking about here today, thinking about intentional ways for us to create an awesome remote environment, and then also developing things on the customer side, such as our social strategy and our customer community. So really excited to dive into this topic and chat more.
Awesome. Thank you. Torin.
So I want to say the obligatory Happy New Year to each and every one of you. Liz, a pleasure to have you on the screen and to hear a bit about what it is that you are doing. Jason, always good to see you and the shield behind you. Jon, to have you in my presence, like I've sat in the office with Daniel and we've talked and we've laughed, but I've never had the chance to meet you. So absolutely a pleasure. And like Liz, I haven't recently joined anywhere, but I have renewed my membership to Humanity 2021. And boy, are we off to a great start. So I think we're going to have an interesting conversation because anyone and everyone who knows me understands that I'm going to talk about diversity and humanity.
Awesome. Good to finally meet you as well. Jason.
I am thrilled to be here as well. Torin, it's tough to follow you, man. It just is. You're just so good. I love being on a panel with you, man. It's so good. Thanks for having me on this. My name is Jason Roberts. I work for Accenture, and my job is to be responsible for the recruiting outsourcing offering. So anytime that one of our clients decides that they want to give somebody else their recruiting work, I do that. And that means I just get to see lots of different recruiting activities in lots of different places and play with lots of different toys to make that happen. I'm looking forward to onboarding as a conversation. It's a little divergent from what I'm normally asked to talk about. So I'm thrilled to kind of shift gears into onboarding. I think it's a huge piece of what we do.
Cool. That's great. Well, why don't we jump in? So Liv, tell us, how has it changed? Like, I'm guessing there was some moment where it was like, oh crap, everybody we're going to hire, we're not going to meet in person. How did you rebuild your onboarding experience?
Well, so interestingly enough, and I think actually my experience gave me a unique perspective. I joined the company back in November, and the company has only been born since we've lived in this COVID era. So we've had the interesting experience of creating a culture from scratch in this remote world rather than trying to adapt our culture and our onboarding experience. I think, when I joined, we were only 17 employees. We're now over 30 employees, very quickly growing and scaling, which is amazing. And I think has some benefits as well with like onboarding classes. But I think, having been onboarded fully remote myself and kind of having anyone on the people team, no really formal onboarding experience, I really got to feel the pains of being onboarded in a remote world and just like how challenging it can be to not have that office and face-to-face interaction. So it really gave me a lot of empathy for creating the process for the people, coming in and realizing that our whole onboarding experience has to be incredibly intentional, from facilitating conversations on the team to, having one-on-one conversations repeatedly with hiring managers. So that way new hires just feel like they can ask all of their questions. So I think that was, a really interesting perspective. But I think, the biggest thing with that is for us, like really creating those frameworks and processes that, things that would more so happen organically in the office and that you would kind of just discover by osmosis. Instead, we have to be super intentional about facilitating those, again, from facilitating one-on-ones with people on the team to cross-functional, having people like join different conversations and being involved in different processes. So I'd say the biggest thing overall is really just like again, being super, super intentional with our processes.
Yeah. That's a trend we're seeing as well, is that onboarding as a category has been around for a long time, and people think of it as like, I got to get somebody on payroll and I got to get them a computer and a desk and a phone and trust that the rest of that stuff will just happen through osmosis.
Right.
And that's not true anymore. You can't take that for granted. And so they have to do all the things you just said. Yeah.
And you have to facilitate that human experience,
That's right.
and I think that's easy to forget, especially when you haven't been in the shoes of having to onboard in a remote world. It can be kind of lonely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jon, can I jump in?
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Absolutely. And I think about what Liz is saying when we talk about that facilitation and intentionality. I think that there's certainly some aspects of the onboarding process that we don't need to abandon, but I think we need to revisit. And one of those aspects that I think we absolutely need to revisit is when, in fact, does onboarding start? Like, I know traditionally organizations have always said it's the moment that the person executes on the offer letter or that the offer is extended to them. Yeah. But I've always argued in my consulting days, I've always argued that the onboarding process starts the moment I hit your website, the moment I express some degree of interest in your organization. What is it that we intentionally can do to keep you engaged with us? What is it that we can do to solicit referrals from you? You may decide that engagement is not something that you need, but that you absolutely have some referrals in your reservoir that would be awesome individuals in our organization. So what are we intentionally doing the moment you hit our website? Are we capturing that email address? Are we inviting you to, little Zoom parties, Zoom happy hours that we're doing? Are we holding raffles where we'll give you a cupcake from one of your local cupcake distilleries? What is it that we are doing? Are we going to introduce you to craft beers from our part of the country because we think that that's an excellent representation of who we are? What are we doing to enroll individuals? And I think, to Liz's point, and I'm sure Jason will underscore, it is absolutely important that we are doing more to create that connection with the candidate, with the prospect, and with the applicant. That's what I'm hoping that we do more of in 2021 and beyond.
I'm curious to get Jason's perspective on this because, for Liv, it's a very small company where you can have this broad role where you're like, I'm in charge of experiences. I can think holistically from the moment they learn my company exists through applying the interview process, the first day, being at the company for a year. That's one experience for that human, right? At a much bigger company that's owned by lots of different departments. Jason, how do you think about it? How does a company adjust to that? Yeah.
Well, I've seen companies do a few different things. Yeah. So the first thing, Torin, to your point, I think that it's tied all the way back to the employee value prop, right? So if you've got that value prop locked in and somebody sees that and they're like, right on, I want to be a part of that. That makes sense to me. And they live that through the recruiting experience and ultimately into onboarding. Yeah. It makes sense. At Accenture, my experience, I just came back to Accenture. I'm a boomerang. And I just came back to Accenture a little over a year ago and went through the onboarding process, and it was killer. It was just absolutely breathtaking, the work that they went through, and even like the security training and all that stuff. They did in a fun, sort of compelling way. They used case studies. Brought me back to when I was doing my MBA work and working in a team to kind of figure things out. They did a brilliant job of that, and they've had to transition that to be exactly what you're saying. It's got to be this virtual version. Now, what I'll say is the culture that I've been accustomed to for a long time is working from home, and I haven't actually worked in an office in maybe 2 decades. It's been a long time since I've worked in an office, so I've become a little bit accustomed to that. But I'm seeing people that are doing this for the first time do some really interesting new things. So a friend of mine just joined a big SaaS provider. They provide ticketing systems, and he's a customer success guy that just joined there. And he came on board. They got him his equipment, and then gave him a budget to go and make his office ergonomic, whatever he needed to do. He had a few $100 to spend on that instead of doing the facilities, which was something I hadn't seen before. They did a big team welcome for him. So they had a chef that did a team Zoom deal where he had all the food and things shipped to his house, and like this apron, like the stuff and all of the like the little spatula was engraved with the company's name, the whole deal. So he's got this swag from his new company, but it's all because they had this experience where they cooked a meal together and then sat down over Zoom and enjoyed this meal together, which that would be a cool deal, like just in normally, but over Zoom, I thought it was the neatest thing I'd ever heard of. Everybody gets to participate. So people are getting incredibly creative in ways to build that engagement and that rich sort of interaction that you have when you're joining a place and make it feel like you're joining a team. I think you're really having to work for it though. Like you're having to think about it, look for the right experiences to make those happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to what Liv started with, is that if you're really intentional about it, you can't just trust that it'll happen. Like somebody thought of that idea and said, we're going to do that for everybody, and that makes a big difference.
That's incredible.
How about from a technology perspective? What are you all seeing of how people are using technology to try to create a better onboarding experience for folks?
So I'll jump in here. There's the dirty little secret of onboarding is there's a bunch of paperwork you have to do. Right, so you have all these documents you have to sign. There's the DocuSign process you go through, and the big deal, typically the in-person deal, is the I-9. Right, someone has to verify in person that you brought your actual documentation, your passport or your driver's license, birth certificate, whatever that may be. Somebody has to look at those and sign off that these are original documents. Mm-hmm. That's actually been waived for right now. So the I-9 piece has been waived. You don't have to do that in person anymore. But what we're seeing is we have a system that we use, the employee experience portal, and it allows hiring managers to track the steps that their new hires have gone through, and of the 15 documents they have to sign. Hopefully not. Hopefully it's like 5. But of the list, how many have they completed? And then it also has a candidate side or a new employee side that says, here are the things, and it gives them their little checklist and sort of tracking via those things. I was just talking to Mercy from South Africa, who's during one of the networking things here, and this is her issue that she runs into. There's too many documents to keep track of, and they use success factors, and there's an onboarding piece of success factors, but everyone is sort of, where this might have been ignored in the past, I think they're leaning on the onboarding capabilities in their tools that they normally sort of would, after a person's accepted the job, that's fine. We'll just make sure they show up on the first day and we'll figure it out from there. Yeah. You can't do that anymore. You have to make sure that all that's tracked and taken care of.
So I'll jump in. How are you guys using technology to create better onboarding experiences?
Well, for me, it's a little bit different because I'm not internal. And so I really am relying on the experience or what's already in place inside of the clients that I'm supporting. But what I would say is that, in keeping with what Jason just said, it doesn't have to be a HIPAA experience. And so I think right now is a very, very good time for organizations, entities to really reevaluate that technology stack, which is something that we do. You reevaluate that technology stack and find out what pieces of technology are in there. They are an impediment. They are simply there just because somebody decided that they wanted to make that buying decision because they were a friend or it was referred to them. But if it's really not adding any value, if it's really not elongating the employee experience, the candidate experience, I should say, then I think that we really should consider whether or not we need it in there. Sometimes more is not better. Sometimes less is better, and less allows us to reallocate our attention and our priority so that we really can truly make a great candidate experience and then ongoing employee engagement journey.
Yeah. On that note, we've been able to consolidate a lot of our processes and a lot of the things that we do over to Rippling. So, everything from doing those I-9s to provisioning laptops to getting access to all of our software and getting single sign-on, it really automates a lot of that manual administrative work, which I think is absolutely incredible because it allows us to, again, really focus on that intentionality and that human experience of onboarding, which I think is just so key. I mean, I think we should always be focusing on the goals of onboarding, right? You want the person to feel engaged with the company and feel like they made the right decision to join. You want to make them feel like they know what they're responsible for and what their performance goals are, so they can hit the ground running and feel like they know the direction they're supposed to go on. You want them to feel like they've been able to meet the team and get to know the team and feel like they've made the right decision there. And then you want to get them onboarded on your product and the value of your product and what you're doing as quickly as possible so they can be as efficient as possible. So I think, being able to automate all of that really allows you to focus on those very clear goals of onboarding.
Yeah. I think there's a trend in there of, we'll talk about automation and think, automation, like we're going to save time and save clicks. And it's actually not about that. It's actually about making sure that the right things happen every single time. They would say, I need these documents signed and I need these people to meet each other, and you can use technology to enforce that's happening every time. And if it doesn't, I'll know, which then allows you to kind of dive into the more human side.
That's right. Onboarding is a virtual checklist, right?
Yeah.
It's you have to have the same documents done every single time. You have to make sure that they get completed, and building in that track and chase. Yeah. Somebody's not filled something out, texting them to say, hey, make sure you get this thing in, or otherwise we won't turn on your email. Those sorts of things become a big deal. So that's helpful.
I want to ask the next question, and also bring in a question from the audience as well, is thinking about how do you start to create culture in this remote world with onboarding, and also how do you think about when does onboarding end? These are kind of related things of how does all this fit together?
Yeah, Jason alluded to it. I think he said his experience was a little longer than before. And I absolutely encourage that people look at the onboarding experience to be something of 6 months at a minimum, preferably a year. And how exciting it would be if we use that same level of excitement. I know signing an I-9 and turning on a computer may not be exciting, but still during those days of having to do that, there is a degree of euphoria. There's that degree of ancient, ambition that's there. There's a different level of how the two people are interacting as it relates to those actions, those exercises. And if we were able to build that excitement into the process over the course of 6 to 12 months, I firmly believe that we'd have a different degree of attentionality. We'd have a degree of productivity. We'd have a degree of longer tenure with our people, because they just feel like we absolutely care. Imagine me reaching out to Liz in month number 9, hitting her with some excitement, making sure that everything is going well. Have we dropped the ball in any particular way? Is there something that you'd suggest to us? How do we make this system better for the next person? Just every single opportunity that we have to make sure that she continues to be re-enrolled in the organization, to me, that is an absolute win.
Yeah.
Torin touched. Sorry, Jason, go ahead.
No, Liv, you go for it. It's your turn.
I was gonna say, now I just completely lost my train of thought. So Jason,
okay, I'll take it then. You can regain it while
I'll think about it.
So I was just going to tag on and just say, little pro tip: don't underestimate the value of swag. So when you join a sports team, you've got their jersey on, and when you join a company, having the shirt that says the company's name and the nice pen or whatever, like have your notebook you're writing in every day with the company logo. It's surprisingly valuable. It makes you kind of feel like you're part of something. Just like when you joined the T-ball team when you were a little kid. Swag is incredibly valuable in making you feel like you're part of the team. I've seen it with all my friends that have changed jobs this time around. They've all come around. What they talk about is the swag they get.
I want to ask a question that just came in. I wanted to ask, and they predicted it, is how do you measure the success of onboarding? How do you know that it went well? So at the end of that 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, we're saying, okay, we did onboarding. What's the data that you look at to say that, hey, we did it well?
So I have a perspective on this. There's a couple of things. One is what you want is for people to come away with a particular feeling, right? So in order to judge whether a person has a feeling, the only way to do that is to ask them. You have to ask them if they have a feeling. So you've got to survey. And specifically, you need to survey, how welcome they feel. There are some, just checks in the box and notches on the belt. Did you get your paperwork done on time? Do you feel like the process was smooth? those sorts of things. But then, did you feel welcome? Do you feel like you're connected to your team? Those sorts of things are the things you have to ask in that survey. So you can do the checkbox things for sure, just for efficiency's sake, and you want to do that. But then you have to ask if people have the feeling that you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think, if you are thinking about onboarding from a diversity and inclusion standpoint, coupled with COVID and our extending what we see as the possibility of talent, not necessarily having to hire talent that's 20 minutes away from the office or 25 miles away from the office. If we can start grabbing people from audiences and communities and geographies where we have not necessarily recruited, then as Jason is saying, we need to make sure that we are doing the best that we can possibly do to bring them into the culture of the organization. If I'm starting to hire people with disabilities and we've not hired them in the past, then I need to do a bit of checking. I need to do a bit of questioning as to whether or not are we accommodating you in a way that makes you feel like you're a part of the team. I'm not suggesting or asking about the phone or the particular type of keyboard or the chair that you're using or the lighting. I'm saying, are we as individuals treating you in a way that makes you feel like you are absolutely a part of the team? And if in fact organizations are going to pursue expanded definitions of inclusion and representation, as I think many of them will, then I think it's going to be important that we extend in a more organic way what types of questions we are asking of new hires.
Yeah, one thing that kind of sparked something in me that Torin and both Jason said earlier. Two things. I think one thing Torin said was like onboarding should be like 6 months to a year, and also onboarding really begins like the second someone like clicks your job description or goes to your website. And I think part of measuring success of onboarding is like retention, especially in those early phases, because if someone makes a decision to leave in their first 6 months, then we didn't represent ourselves the best way on our website, on our job posting, in the interview process. And I think, a core pillar of that is your company values. And I think we tend to underestimate the power of values. And I think it's because people aren't always building those values in the best way, in terms of like values should be a really strong framework for people to make decisions, and also to get a clear understanding of if they're going to vibe with your company culture and approach to your work and the way you work. Not everyone, when they read your values, should be like, yes, I like that. Some people should be like, I don't know if that's something I'm super aligned with. And I think we kind of tend to go towards these like very fluffy values that like everyone can get behind. And I think that that's a missed opportunity to really express who you guys are and the way you work and make a statement, and therefore allow people to make an educated decision on if that environment is going to be right for them or if they're better suited elsewhere. So I think that's something that's really important too through this onboarding process, is like know who you are, be honest about who you are, and allow people to make educated decisions.
I think there's actually like a meta point behind all of this, which is that when we say like, oh, you should survey people, you should ask, do they fit with, are they happy? Was the job explained well? The meta point is that you should measure that, right? I think most companies will talk to you and say, do you actually measure the effectiveness of onboarding at all? And say, no, it's just something that sort of happens. And if we're good or bad at it, we don't even notice it. We just know that we have attrition down the line, right?
And I think to Audra's question, I believe that was a question asked by Audra around measurement, or whomever it was. I apologize if I misattached it. But I think, the question of measurement is extremely important, and that it doesn't always have to be a qualitative thing. I'm sorry, it doesn't always have to be a quantitative thing. It can absolutely be qualitative. And I think that we should absolutely be unafraid to pursue the qualitative discussion around whatever it is in terms of the talent acquisition journey, or the candidate journey, if you will. Just ask questions. I mean, don't be afraid to say, it's like dialing 911 and just sitting on the other end of the phone and you don't say anything. Like, they don't know what your emergency is if you're not going to communicate. So let's just communicate and let's grow from whatever it is, plus or minus, in terms of their response.
I'd throw in one other measurement that Torin, you hinted at earlier, which is referrals. I always think it's a great proxy. If new hires refer people within 3 or 4 months of them starting, you did something right to make them feel a part of a company, because you don't refer somebody if you don't actually feel a part of the place. And so it's actually a good little secret metric.
And quite
Well,
frankly,
I think that's
well, I was going to say, Jason, quite frankly, that's an honest, metric, no matter what part of the timeline you're in.
That's right.
If it's in the first 3 months, awesome.
Right.
But if it's 18 months from now and people are referring, or 36 months from now, I think it's still the same measurement. Like, if I feel good about being here, then I'm certainly going to tell Liz, Jason, or John about, the organization.
That's right.
Well, and onboarding works, I think, better with referrals. So they already have a connection point internally. They know somebody. They're able to sort of have something to latch onto. I think that's a big part of why referrals tend to work out better in the end than any other source. It's really, we hear a lot about active versus passive candidates, and people tend to ramble on about that for days. The only actual data on value, like quality of hire, that we have from any source is in referrals. And it's because they have a connection point. They know what they're getting into. They know what the company is like. Hopefully their friend has represented that company in a way that's in alignment with the way the company had intended. And they come on board. It's really valuable.
Cool. Thank you. I'm going to bring in Elizabeth asked a question. When people eventually return to in-person onboarding, so optimistic, which technology do we anticipate will stick around?
I mean, I will still be automating a lot of our onboarding with Rippling. So I think as much as you can automate those administrative tasks, it really allows for the space for creativity. And again, just touching back to that intention and human experience, which I think is just so key in, a remote experience. You have to be a little bit more thoughtful about that than in person, because it's a lot easier to be warm and engaging in an in-person interaction. So yeah, I think as much as we can automate those experiences, it really does just allow for that space to be creative and thoughtful, and that space also to check in. And I think, something that I was thinking about earlier was, we talked a lot about like getting the qualitative feedback and checking in on people. I think, that's beneficial and goes both ways. And I think it's a good thing to frame it that way to people, because I think in onboarding, whether remote or not, it can be difficult to not feel like a nuisance to like ask questions and take people's time. And at least in a in-person world, again, you have that opportunity to learn by osmosis, just be around. You see who like works together, who's in certain conversations. You just naturally pick things up. And I think a great way to allow people to ask questions and like feel comfortable to talk to you is to like say like, look, like we want your feedback. This onboarding experience, there's always room for improvements. If you have questions, other people have questions. So please ask us those questions and don't feel like you need to hold those in or like you're like feeling like a nuisance. And so I think really framing it that way with people is really helpful. But yeah, I think as much as you can automate, it allows you to focus on those opportunities.
My thought is not necessarily a specific technology, but the functions that are needed, right? So you have the administrative stuff, right? You have the checklist of things that you need to sign off and being able to track your progress, and for your manager to be able to track your progress on those things in order to make sure that those things get done. I think that's a piece. I think the function of things that capabilities that make you feel included. So messaging that treats you like a human instead of like a robot. By the way, that doesn't have anything to do with the function of I'll send a message now. It has to do with how you write the message. It has to do with the language that you use when you send the things to make people feel more comfortable. So I think those functions are going to survive. And I think that much of what we talked about in order to build culture and to make someone feel like they're a part of the thing wasn't a technology thing, right? Much of that was about creating experiences that brought them into the fold, and doing things that brought about a particular feeling. And I will be looking for. I'll be looking to configure the technologies. Again, not a functional difference. It's a configuration in a language that you use. But I'll be looking to implement those things in a way that will drive a feeling of welcome and being a part of something.
Yeah, and to that point, the ones that's going to definitely stay around is us. I've always said that people do the best job of hiring people, and so everything should be built around us. If I'm the leader, if I'm the person who has hired you to be a part of our organization or my team business unit, then I should be the person driving that connection inside of the organization. And anything that is speaking to Jason's point around messaging, anything that is speaking or interfacing with my employee, my team member, it should be a compliment to who I am. If it's not a compliment to who I am, my ability to lead, my ability to inspire, my ability to develop and motivate, then I should remove it out of the system. I don't need any technology in my system that's an impediment to me building an incredible relationship with the people that are on my team.
Yeah, I think there's a really important point in there, which is I think what's happened during this whole period is we've realized that onboarding isn't just about HR, what HR does. It's actually about you as like the hiring manager. You're saying, no, I'm hiring you to be on my team, and I have to have ownership for that and accountability for that. And so when we go back post this whole period, I don't think that changes. I think people still realize oh, actually, the point of onboarding is I've hired this person. They've got to come onto my team and be successful. Mm-hmm. We're not going back to thinking of it as an administrative function that HR and IT does, right?
Right.
One thing, there's a theme in the conference, I think, today of talking about the joining of kind of recruiting and talent management. And so we've talked a little bit about how onboarding starts at the moment they decide that they want to apply to your job or before. And through that whole interview process, you're kind of building this relationship. Let's go the other way of as these things get joined together, what's onboarding's role within that transition?
So there's a couple of different things, right? So talent management is, let's define it briefly for anyone who's not in here. There's been some discussion about looking at hiring not as just hiring a full-time employee, but also a broader definition. Are we looking at building internal talent? Are we looking at hiring someone? Are we looking at bringing on a contractor? So the term that's used is build, buy, or borrow, right? Are we trying to buy talent through hiring, build it through training and development, or borrow it through a contract relationship? I think looking at onboarding is traditionally what we've been talking about is onboarding new employees, right? So I think the expansion of that and the expansion of culture to contractors is really valuable and important. But also onboarding is not just about onboarding to a company, it's onboarding to a team. Mm-hmm. So as you transfer internally, making someone feel like they're a part of that team is a big deal too. And I think that onboarding and becoming a part of something new is something that we should probably be more mindful of as we're looking at adding anyone to the team, whether they're a gig worker, they're a contractor, they're a full-time employee, they're just somebody transferring from HR to, God help us, to IT. When any of these things happen, making them feel like they're a part of that team is really the end goal, and the business goal is to making them productive as soon as possible. So those are the two things: the human goal and the business goal. I think are the two things we have to keep in mind when we're doing that. But I think some of the same principles from full-time employees can be applied for contractors and for internal transfers as well.
Mm-hmm. I just want to jump in.
Yeah, you brought up something interesting, Jason, around.
Yeah, and I think we redefine what's required. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's what's required. Again, I think a lot of organizations are going to allow a lot of people to work differently. I'm not necessarily going to mandate that you work that full 40-hour week. I'm not going to really put much on you after maybe 6 p.m. because I want to be conscious of your family and the scenario that you're currently in. So I think it's going to be in how we communicate transparently what's really expected of you when you are joining my team. And I hate to say that, I hate to sound old-fashioned, I hate to sound like a dinosaur in that regard, but there is just something that is extremely important to me around how a person leads. If I have a great leader, if I can stand up incredible leaders, if I can nurture and replicate, duplicate incredible leaders, then I know that I'm going to have a high performing organization. And that's what I want. And for me, it comes down to leadership and the way that you engage and interact with people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One thing I was going to say that like Jason brought up is, the onboarding of the team, right? And there's macro culture, the overall company culture, and then there's the micro culture of, function, then team specific micro cultures. And I think we often forget the onboarding experience within those micro cultures of like how to best set people up for success in those environments. We think about the holistic, how to set people up for company success and like role success, but less so on that like very team specific. And I think that's because, HR, talent, our responsibility is to ensure that holistic experience is great. But it's really on the hiring manager to ensure that their team is onboarded into those micro cultures, micro nuances of the way that they work, and that those are easily understandable and digestible for people who join their team.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think we're now coming to our last minute or so. Closing. We have 2 minutes. Okay. I want to kick off a whole nother big question. Any closing thoughts on what did we talk about? What's something?
Hey, so less is more. Real simple. Less is more. Less allyship, more action. Less technology, more humanity. Less apple pies, comfort, and excuses for racists. And let's be more human.
From an onboarding perspective, I'm going to leave thinking about the feelings that I can convey, the comfort that I can bring to someone. It's actually a pretty jarring experience to change jobs, right? And they actually count it out there as a trauma. And so if you change jobs, it's or even move houses, those are big experiences. It's actually the tent pole that you measure your life by. Hey, back when I worked for so-and-so, or back when I lived in this place, those are the ways that you describe the timeline of your life. And that's what this is. So making someone feel comfortable and like they've made that transition in a good way, just know they're going through a bunch at that time. It's a big deal for them to make that shift. So the more comfortable you can make them feel, the more welcome you can make that feel, the better they're going to do. And from a business perspective, we're just going to talk capitalist business. The more productive they'll be, the faster, right? So that's a good thing. So both the human and the business sort of combines there and shares the same need at that point.
Absolutely. I echo everything everyone said. I think, we got to talk a lot philosophically, but also some tactical takeaways as well. And I would just like to offer to everyone watching, I love talking about these things. Please feel free to reach out to me. I don't know how everyone else on the panel feels, but I would, love to chat more about this and also offer, tactical help in terms of there's a lot of frameworks and guides I have that I'm happy to share as inspiration for people as they're building out their onboarding resources. So just wanted to offer that up to the whole community here.
That's great. We'll give you the last word. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for participating, and thanks everybody for watching.
Thanks, Jon, for moderating. Thanks, everyone. Bye.